Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my live. So, today I'm not doing makeup. Um, Although I could possibly do some I already put my lip gloss on. um, but I wanted to discuss toxicity in relationships and what happens, right, when we find ourselves in the wrong relationship, what it can actually do to us and our self-esteem. It chips away. It chips away at your self-esteem over time. And, I want to wait for some more people to come in, but if nobody comes in right away, I'm just going to get started and I may, you know, revisit some points. So I want you to think about what happened the last relationship that you left, right? Have you ever left a relationship and left with the feeling that you weren't the same person that you were prior to the relationship? Um, did you come to that point where you stopped trusting your judgment? You know, did your confidence disappear after the relationship was over, or even during the course of the relationship, right? Without you maybe even realizing it. Those are important questions that you have to ask yourself when it comes to whether or not the relationship or the situation that you're in, if it's actually toxic for you. When you start having to question your judgment, you start having to question, how you feel about yourself, and you're maybe not necessarily feeling like your best self, or even almost having like an outer body experience sometimes. And so let's talk about self-esteem, right? And what that actually means. So, self-esteem is about trusting yourself, believing your feelings matter, knowing that you deserve respect, okay? Um, Also, believing you're enough without having to necessarily prove that you're enough, right? So, that's how you differentiate self-esteem from ego, right? And so, of course, trusting yourself, having the ability to believe in your feelings, that they matter, being able to differentiate between when you're being gaslit and, when you're in a situation where you're constantly, being told, oh, you're crazy, or you're making things up, these things are not really happening. That's where the trust in yourself starts to dissipate, right? That's where you start having that outer body experience and wondering, okay, maybe it's me, or, and don't let the person like alienate you from, your village. Because when the alienation starts happening, or the separation, divide and conquer, that's when you don't necessarily have those people that you can kind of ping things off of and say, okay, like, am I going crazy here? Or, you're only left with yourself and your thoughts. Okay, so self-esteem, when it's healthy, right, it makes it easier to create boundaries. It makes it easier for you to say no to things, right? It makes it easier to walk away from situations that no longer serve you. But when you start finding it difficult to walk away from things, or to say no to things, that's how you know that there's an issue with the self-esteem there. And thank you for joining, Dr. Fleeta. Appreciate you. So this live, I'm talking about the dangers of toxic relationships, and I remember watching your live earlier today when you were talking about, just weight loss, potato loss, and just being in situations that could be messing up your nervous system, maybe causing the cortisol levels to inflate, and you don't know why you're losing weight. So that kind of like triggered something in me to want to discuss, self-esteem and the dangers of being in a toxic relationship and how it can like pretty much just chip away at your self-esteem if you're not careful, right? So how toxic relationships slowly chip away at self-esteem. So they're going to show up in different ways, right? One way, it's going to be constant criticism of self. You're going to constantly always start to believe that you are the problem. Like it may show up as avoiding conflict, right? Like you may have a huge issue with something and you're like, you know what? I know if I bring this up, it's just going to cause an argument and it's probably my fault anyway. And, tending to like overcorrect your behavior. And you start labeling yourself as being too emotional, too sensitive, or not enough, right? And this is usually coming from a place of you hearing what was being said to you, right? So if you are putting yourself in a situation where someone is not treating you well and they are, maybe blaming you for things or telling you that you're overreacting, after a while that starts to seep in, right, to your psyche. And you won't necessarily need that person to criticize you anymore. They've already programmed you to be critical of yourself. So that's one way, right? Another way is gaslighting, right? That's something that that actually brought up a little while ago when it comes to not necessarily being able to trust your own judgment. When you're being gaslit, a lot of the times it happens so insidiously to the point where you don't even realize that it's a gradual thing. Like it could be something as simple as, you explaining a story that you both were maybe at an event and something was said and you're recalling the event with the person. It's light, it's not a big deal, right? And they say something really like almost sly, like, oh no, that's not how it happened, or no, you're not telling the story right. And now it's like, especially if it's in front of other people, you may want to push back on it. You may want to say, nah, I was there. Like, I know what happened. But, when they do it in front of other people, you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place because you're like, okay, I'm not going to make this a thing. I'm going to wait. Maybe I'll bring this up later, right? But if it's just between you and the person and they bring up, the fact that you may be overreacting or that's not how it went, blah, blah, blah. It can cause you to start questioning yourself, right? And if this is happening repeatedly, after a while, you're not going to need to be in this person's presence to start questioning your judgment. You can be like never had an issue with ordering coffee, right? Now you don't even know what kind of coffee you like. And you're like, trying to figure out, okay, oh no, well maybe I don't really like that anymore or whatever. Um, you start asking yourself, maybe I'm crazy, or maybe I'm just imagining things, or even back to the self-blaming. Maybe I deserved whatever treatment I'm getting from this person. Okay. Another way that toxic relationships start to slowly chip away at your self-esteem is feeling the need to walk on eggshells around this person, right? Now, this one in particular is interesting because, and I believe I brought it up a little while ago when it came to just avoiding conflict, right? You may want to tell yourself, or I'm not tell yourself, you may want to tell the person how you feel about something that hurt your feelings, right? And you know that they're going to blow this thing out of proportion, right? They're going to just turn the finger back at you. They're going to make it seem like you're the one that likes to start drama. And so now you're being less expressive about your emotions. You're letting things go that shouldn't be let go. You're letting go of things that should be addressed, right? And then it starts to build up. You stop speaking honestly. You start minimizing yourself. You stop asking questions, those clarifying questions that's going to help you maybe have some better conflict resolution. And that also will show up as you stop expressing your needs, right? Let's say you need for them to be more vocal. You need for them to be able to discuss a situation, maybe not at the time that it happened, but eventually, right? And we all know that sometimes when we don't address things right away or within a certain time frame, it gets swept under the rug and then it's never addressed, right? And then when those things are never addressed, they start to collect. And that's where the bitterness starts to come, seep in, or you know, you're just angry. You're just looking at them and you have all the stuff that you want to say and you just can't say it, right? So little by little, you start to disappear, right, in these toxic relationships. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. So during this live, I decided to, discuss what happens in toxic relationships and how they can chip away at our self-esteem. Now, on my page, on my channel, YouTube, and all these other platforms, I focus on personal development. And I believe that the key foundation to personal development is going to be self-esteem. Like, your level of self-esteem is going to affect everything that you do, whether it is from, making decisions, how you view yourself, your confidence, how you express yourself, what opportunities you take advantage of. All of those things are requiring you to have a high level of self-esteem. If that is damaged in any way and you're not working on that, if you're not trying to develop the skills to increase your self-esteem, it's going to affect everything that you do. And eventually, if you're not careful, you can fall into a very depressed state, to where you just don't feel worthy of anything. You don't feel worthy of being in the room, right? You don't feel worthy of existing, for lack of better words. So another thing is intermittent reinforcement, right? You want to explain the cycle, the bad treatment, then affection, then distance, then affection again. Your brain begins to chase relief. Okay, so intermittent reinforcement, this is what happens in toxic relationships, right? Where it can be referred to as the cat and mouse game, right? Where someone goes kind of hot and cold with you. And a lot of people, not just men, women do it too, right? But when we're discussing toxic relationships and what makes it so toxic, there is almost like an addictive feeling that you're getting from the elevated hormones and then the drop, the pickup and then the drop, right? And that term or that phenomenon is referred to as intermittent reinforcement. It's a cycle, right? And once you're in the cycle, it's hard to get out of the cycle because most of the time you're in the phase of, in a toxic relationship, right? You're in the phase of trying to get back to when things were good, right? You need that reinforcement that things are okay. Some people, how they say, you have the makeup segs. Like, I don't know if I could say the whole word on TikTok, but makeup to breakup or breakup to makeup, right? People get stuck in that loop, and before you know it, years are going by. Self-esteem is deteriorating, self-worth is deteriorating because they are looking for this person to validate them, to make them feel worthy. They're looking for this person to tell them that it is okay to exist. It's okay to be loved. And no one else is going to be able to give you this feeling except for me, right? And with the intermittent reinforcement, it's a weird phenomenon because the person is pretty much inflicting the pain, but only they can relieve the pain, right? So you're always going to be looking to them to bandage the wound that they created. And that's if you're in a toxic relationship, right? The next thing is going to be isolation. And this is something else that I touched on earlier when I discussed being gaslit, right? If you are in a toxic relationship where the person has isolated you and you don't have that village, you don't have that friend group, you don't have that voice of reason that can say, hey, like, this is a little strange. Are you sure that you're okay with this? Or you don't seem like yourself. If you don't have those people in your life, or even just one person, right? It's usually because you've been isolated, and that is intentional a lot of times, the whole divide and conquer thing. And it doesn't always have to be just being isolated from your friend group. It can be isolating you from your hobbies, right? A lot of the times when people break up with these toxic relationships, they've stopped doing the things that they enjoy. They stopped their routine, whether, if you're on a fitness journey, you're working out, you stop going to the gym because maybe it made the person feel jealous or insecure. If you like, I don't know, coloring, you like painting, you like playing an instrument, maybe they start complaining about, oh, well, you're always at that class, or you're always doing this, or, making it an issue. And that will start to chip away at what makes you feel alive. Now you're completely dependent upon this person to give you life, as opposed to going outside of the relationship and having your own interests, right? So you want to be careful of that. You want to be careful of how toxic relationships can cause you to shrink. It can cause you to lose your independence. I think that was something else that I just touched on when it comes to the codependency or even the enmeshment, right? You've literally melted into this person. You like what they like. Like they don't like chicken, now you don't like chicken, or they're vegan now you don't eat meat. And what if you love to eat chicken, right? You could cook, you could throw it down in the kitchen, like you really know how to cook, but now you can't even practice your craft because this person has made you completely change everything, right? So now I want to discuss signs to look out for, right? Signs that your self-esteem may have been damaged, right? So if it's not a lot of people in here now, but that'll change one of these days. But important things to ask yourself is, are you apologizing constantly? And you may not even notice that you're doing it, right? You might just find yourself saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That was so stupid of me," or over explaining yourself, right? When things, it's not even that deep, but you feel like you need to go, into great detail about why you're doing a thing. And a person that may be used to how you used to behave will be looking at you like, girl, okay, like, it's all right. It's not that deep. Another way that you can tell that your self-esteem has been damaged by a toxic relationship is needing reassurance all the time. Now, there's nothing wrong with a little pep talk, right? We all like to get compliments. Most people, if you're not like super shy, most people like to hear that they're doing well, right? That they're doing a good job. But it can become to or get to the point where you like need it to do anything. Like you can't do anything unless someone else tells you that it's okay to do it. All right. That's an example of needing reassurance all the time. Like you put on a dress. Are you sure this is okay? Like, are you sure? Like my hair looks up. Like, girl, look at yourself in the mirror. Do you like how you look? That's good. Like as long as you like how you look, that should be enough. But when your self-esteem has been chipped away at, you can't even see yourself for who you are. You can't give yourself that inner pep talk because it just takes so much work, right? It's so hard to just say something nice about yourself, right? So that's where the constant need of self-assurance or reassurance comes in. Fear of abandonment, right? And this can be big when it comes to, codependent relationships where you might be in that intermittent reinforcement cycle where you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Oh my goodness, is this going to be the time that we break up? Is this going to be the time where it's really over? What am I going to do? I'll never meet someone else, right? That fear of abandonment is what is going to keep you stuck in the toxic relationship. It's going to make you feel like there is no other options out there, even though there's billions of people on this planet. For some reason in your brain, you're going to start to feel like, okay, this is it for me. This is all I deserve. This is all I'm going to get. I might as well just stick it out, right? So that's one indicator that your self-esteem has been damaged. Another is, I touched on struggling to make decisions. That goes kind of hand in hand with the of needing reassurance all the time. And you start to accept behaviors. This is another thing. You start to accept behaviors that at one point you never tolerated. But now all of a sudden it's not a big deal. That's how you know self-esteem is in the tank. When you start removing those boundaries because, fear of abandonment, fear of, not being able to get something else, right? And there could be a lot of reasons why you start to accept things that you never tolerated. It could be something as simple as not even realizing that the boundary is gone. Right? You may not even realize it. You may not even know. Okay? So you believe love has to be earned, right? And unfortunately, sometimes we learn this in childhood, and we don't get to determine or control how we come into this world, right? Who we come into this world to. But the need or the thought that you have to earn love doesn't always come from childhood. Sometimes you could have never thought that before, right? Because you are so giving. But then you find yourself in a toxic relationship where you're jumping through hoops for this person. You're trying to make this person prove to this person that you're worthy of love, right? And then they will behave in a way that, like, they will only give you love if you do something for them, right? So now it turns into like a quid pro quo thing. Like, you do something for me, maybe I'll love you, but then it's inconsistent too, right? Like, so what worked yesterday, as far as like you, and they say, they make it an issue like, oh, every time I call you, you never answer the phone. Now you walking around with your phone in your hand so you don't miss the call, right? And you answering the call on the first ring, and then you thinking that's enough to not have an argument, but then they still make up an argument about something else. So that's kind of an example of, feeling like you have to earn the love that you want to receive. Like, you have to be on your best behavior, in order to just get something that should be given freely when you're in a relationship with someone, right? So we're going to talk about why people stay. And, there's always going to be reasons why people stay. Everybody has their reason, and you're not done until you're done, right? A lot of the times we can get frustrated with our friends sometimes, or our friends could get frustrated with us if we're in a situation, or they're in a situation that we know is not good for them. But it's important to understand that they may be stuck in a cycle. We may be stuck in a cycle. And until we make the conscious decision, or they make the conscious decision to break the cycle, it's not going to stop. Okay? So it's important to understand that when someone stays in a situation that's toxic for them, it doesn't make them weak, right? They may have, I had to turn my light on because it's getting dark outside. They may just have a weak framework, right? It doesn't mean that they're weak as a person. Doesn't mean that they lack strength in all areas. It may be just that one particular area that they've fallen short. So it's important for us to not necessarily judge them, even though it's a little difficult, right? Because we judge people all the time. It's human. It's what we do. But they stay because their self-esteem has been already eroded, right? And in order for them to leave that situation, or to even consider the relationship or situation as toxic, the self-esteem will need to increase. Okay? Like, you can't put the cart before the horse. They have to believe that they have the power to leave. They have to believe that they have the ability to leave, and then they will leave. When you don't believe that you deserve better, better does not feel available. And this is something that I discussed a little while ago as well, where the self-criticism, or the belief that there's nothing else out there for you. This is the only thing that you have access to for whatever reason, whether you feel like you're not pretty enough, or you feel like you're not smart enough, or you feel like you're not thin enough, or have enough money, whatever story it is that you're telling yourself. A lot of the times people stay in toxic relationships because they feel like that is what they deserve, right? If they believed that they deserved better, they would get better, right? They would have more. They would do more, but they don't, and that's where they find themselves. Okay? The next point, rebuilding self-esteem. So when you are, let's say, the friend that is helping this person rebuild their self-esteem, what you want to do is you want to offer them hope, right? You want to make them feel like they can do the thing, right? And you can encourage them, to have these daily practices. Now, I'm a personal development strategist, so everything that I am about to tell you are things that I have proven to be tried and true. Okay, these things work. They work. If you're focused, right, and disciplined enough, because discipline is also one of the key foundations that you have to have when it comes to building self-esteem, right? You have to want to do it, and you have to keep doing it, just like anything else. Anything that's going to require change is going to require you to continue to plug away at it, okay? So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make a concerted effort to keep your promises to yourself, okay? You're going to spend time with emotionally safe people. You cannot build Rome in a day, okay? And you cannot build your self-esteem when it's already in the tanker, being around other toxic people or people that are similar to what you're trying to move away from, okay? The next thing is you're going to have to stop explaining your boundaries to people. No is no, okay? One of my boundaries is I don't like to go out back-to-back nights, okay? I'm not about that life at all. I like to plan whether I'm going to go hang out with friends or go to an event, plan for that outing, and have my downtime the day before and the day after. Once I start pushing that and start trying to do too much, I'm going to be depleted, right? So that's one of my boundaries. Another one of my boundaries is I turn my phone off. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I'm not going to tell y'all what time because that's none of y'all business. But I like to put my phone on Do Not Disturb because I don't want to be on the phone till all hours of the night knowing that I wake up early. So that is one of my boundaries, right? And I don't need to explain that to anybody. I know that my body needs a certain amount of rest. I know that I like to have a certain level of silence before I go to bed. So that's my reason. But when I'm telling people, oh, you're going to have to call me at a certain time, or before a certain time, because my phone goes on Do Not Disturb, I'm not explaining nothing else. Okay? That is my boundary, and, that is what you need to be doing when it comes to setting boundaries. Stop over-explaining yourself. The more you over-explain, the more you're telling people, sending people an indicator that you're not really too sure about what you're telling them. Okay? Learn to trust your intuition again. That's a big one. Because nobody can feel what you feel. You meet someone, right? And it's just something about them that it don't feel right. When you're coming out of a toxic relationship, or in a toxic relationship, not trusting your intuition is a part of the process of not trusting yourself, right? Intuition is internal. It's a voice, it's a feeling, it's something that overpowers you to the point where you can't deny it, right? But when your self-esteem is low and your confidence is low and you can't make regular decisions, now you don't know whether the intuition is really real or it's something else. Okay? So coming out of something toxic and learning to build your self-esteem, that's going to be one of the biggest things that you're going to have to learn how to do. And that is learning to trust your intuition. One thing that I loved doing as I started learning to trust myself more was playing in traffic, right? And I know it sounds silly, but if I'm driving, down the highway and something tells me to switch lanes, I will, right? I won't question it. I'll just switch lanes. Of course, look both ways, look in the rear view mirror, all of those things. But a lot of the times, I love when it works out for me because it helps me understand, like, okay, I'm strengthening this muscle. Learning to trust yourself is a muscle, like you have to strengthen. And the more you exercise that muscle of trusting your intuition, the quicker you're able to see the results, right? The quicker it could be something as simple as something telling you to make a right turn, right? And you don't listen to that. You're like, oh no, I don't know what that is. I'm just gonna keep driving straight. Now they're doing construction, and now you're stuck. Your drive that should have took you 5 minutes is now taking you 20 because you didn't listen to that intuition, right? But it's okay, right? Because now you know next time what that feeling was, what that comes from. We can't always explain everything, but it's a muscle that you have to exercise time and time again. The last thing is going to be, or the last part of rebuilding your self-esteem after a toxic relationship, is forgiving yourself for staying, right? They say hindsight is 2020, right? And you can always well, not always. Sometimes we can look back at a situation and say, you know what? Had I known then what I know now, I would have made a completely different decision. But you weren't the person that you are now back then. So you wouldn't have made that decision. And that's why you have to forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for not being more evolved, right? Like, who I am today is not who I'm going to be, hopefully, right? If I keep evolving, if I keep leveling up, it's not going to be who I'm going to be in 2 years. Or I don't want to say next week because that's kind of quick to be evolving. Evolution takes time, right? So let's say 2 years from now, I'm gonna be my mindset. I can't even fathom the mindset that I'm gonna have in 2 years in comparison to today, right? And that doesn't mean that 2 years from now I get to beat up who Millie is today. I don't get to do that, right? Because there's always room for growth. And as long as you have the ability to forgive yourself, you are not going to question your decisions so much. Because when you start doing too much of the self-criticism, it takes longer to make decisions because you're foreseeing making the wrong decision, and then you're also foreseeing your inability to forgive yourself for making that wrong decision. So, self-esteem isn't something someone gives you back. It's something you rebuild one decision at a time, right? So that I just touched on that. Being able to forgive yourself now helps you make better decisions later on because if you get it wrong, it's okay. Most of the time we can recover from the bad decisions that we make, okay? All right. So I'm going to ask you guys some questions, and you don't have to put it in the chat. You can just reflect on these questions, right? When did you realize, and this is if you are coming from a place of a toxic relationship, when did you realize that your confidence had changed, right? That's one question you can ask yourself. What is one boundary you wish you had set for yourself sooner? What helped you rebuild your confidence? Have you ever mistaken anxiety for love? Now, that is a big one. People always talk about the butterflies and all of that. Child, that's anxiety. That is your nervous system saying, danger, danger. Also, what's something you'll never tolerate again? That's big, right? So when you're coming out of a toxic relationship, you have to ask yourself those questions. You have to ask yourself, when did I realize that my confidence was changing? What was the boundary that I said, I wasn't going to let go of, but I let it go? And which one do I feel like I should have put up sooner? What helped rebuild my confidence back up? Because just because you survive one toxic relationship don't mean that you ain't never going to encounter another potential toxic relationship. But we live and we learn, right? And once you've dug yourself out of something, and you can remember like how much it took for you to build yourself back up again, it's more likely you're not going to repeat a lot of the same things if you do the work. So, in closing, I wanted to say that one of the greatest signs of healing isn't finding someone new, right? It's looking back at the version of yourself that accepted less and realizing that you never have to abandon that person again, okay? But also, I want you to keep in mind that you are never going to be who you were prior to that toxic relationship. And that's okay. It's okay to evolve. It's okay to grow. It's okay to rebuild. But the new version of you is just going to be more enlightened. You may not go back to who you were because now you've changed. And as long as you're continuing to develop yourself, as long as you're working on your personal development, change is good. You should welcome change, in fact. So protect your peace, protect your standards, and most importantly, protect your relationship with yourself, because the relationship that you have with yourself is one of the most important relationships that you will ever have. The relationship that you have with yourself will determine all of the relationships that you will entertain in the future, and the ones you decide to keep and the ones that you decide to let go. But it starts with self. Okay? So, if this conversation helped you, I want you to do me a favor and give me a follow, like, share. And I only say like because I'm probably going to post this somewhere, even though I'm live right now. But I'm Millie Sez, and I want to have more discussions on discipline, confidence, discernment, building your self-esteem, all of those things to come. And if you're comfortable with sharing, let me know in the comments, what was an important lesson that you learned, or something that you taught yourself when it comes to building your self-esteem. Also, what is something that you learned from your last relationship that may have been toxic? What did you learn about yourself? What did it teach you? And how are you going to move forward? So until we meet again, I will see you in the next video, on the next live. Bye.